Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before declaring open the meeting, Clause 91(4) of the Governance and Meeting Conduct Local Law provides the following. This public meeting is being recorded to improve access to the meeting for our community. The recording will be published and will be retained by Council in accordance with Council's legal obligations. As a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. The acknowledgement of the traditional owners. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting. We pay our respects to their elders and to elders from other communities who may be here today. The opening prayer. Almighty God, we humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this council in its deliberations so that we may truly preserve the welfare of the people whom we serve. Amen. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this council meeting. You will be given the opportunity to ask questions on each item on the agenda, and then there will be a public question time following the business of the meeting. It's been my process that each member of the gallery would be given a maximum of 2 questions in public question time. We have quite a few here tonight. If you gave everyone carte blanche that they wanted to ask questions, we could be here all night. So I'll continue with that. No apologies, no granting leave of absence, no citizenship ceremony. Confirmation of minutes. So I'd like to move the confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 17th of April.
Now I'd like to move the minutes with the addition of... Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the motion to the minutes, but I'd like to add the full conversation of Phil Larkin and questions, please, as per YouTube.
So we're moving the minutes. You need to tell me what you want to put in there.
The full conversation of Phil Larkin.
So the second part of the questions from last meeting.
Thank you.
Someone second the motion? Second, Councillor Benton. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried. Conflict of interest? No conflict of interest. First, item 9.1, reception of petition.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A petition endorsed by 22 Millwall community and business groups has been received regarding the vacant block of land situated on the corner of the Snow and Bobnawara Millwall roads. The petition requests that Council consider the purchase of this block of land and transform it into a facility that will benefit the community. Council previously resolved a matter in confidential business at its ordinary meeting on the 18th of July 2017 in relation to this block of land. Council will deal with the first part of the recommendation in relation to this matter, and that is that Council remove the confidential status of its resolution 23.1, consideration of potential land purchase, resolved at its ordinary meeting on the 18th of July 2017.
Any questions from the gallery? I'd like to move recommendation 1. Councillor Buswell, Councillor Reeves. Any discussion? Put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried.
I'll read it out. So the recommendation made at the confidential meeting on the 18th of July 2017 was that Council formally acknowledges the current owner for their presentation and offer and resolves not to proceed with the unbudgeted purchase of land at Lot 1, Title Plan 9394 volume 10354, folio 898, Snow Road, Millawall, and advises the owner of its decision. We'll now move on to part 2 of the original recommendation. That is that the petition regarding the land on the corner of Snow and Bogdanwarra Millawall roads be received, and a slight amendment to the second part of part 2, that the petition be referred to the Chief Executive Officer for consideration and response.
Any questions from the government? Yes. Could you come up and state your name, please?
Mr Mayor, I don't know whether I'm in order at this stage or not, but many years ago there was a block of land became available in Moyhu, old railway land, and the district here canvassed and bought the land themselves. I'd like council to take that into account, that the land here was purchased by the local residents.
Thank you. Any other question? I would like to move the recommendation. Councillor Curry, Councillor Rees. Any discussion? Put the motion, or Councillor Rees?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in relation to this, the purchase of the land, Millawall does struggle out there at the present time for parking in the main central area. This block is probably the largest focal point there of Millawall, and has been for years as a focal point. Millawall lacks on toilet accommodation. Tourists coming through can't stop. So it will be my push to continue to try and purchase this parcel of land, or part thereof, if it sells, and renegotiate a different deal at some stage that I will put to council. It's a thing that Millawall needs, more public acceptance of that land, obviously, but for council to look for further at it, as this is a main tourist hub for our region. Thank you.
Councillor Russell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I certainly support the development of Millawall. Certainly, I support what Councillor Rees said. There's insufficient parking there and buses won't stop anymore. I'd certainly support development on this block as well, but it needs some toilets there in Millawall. And so I'd like this to start the discussion in Millawall to develop a lot more commercial than what is there now. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Curry.
While we've heard one side of the obviously wanting to do it, I think there's plenty of arguments for also not to do it, and I actually look forward to the CEO's report as to what the recommendation will come from this. Thank you.
So, through the Mayor, the change that was proposed to Part 3 was really to save the delay in waiting for a further report and instead enable me to provide some response tonight. That doesn't prevent the council from calling for another report on this at some future point in time, but in terms of just responding to the petition, which is all we're really doing tonight, removing the confidentiality of our previous resolution in July really just enables us to respond to that petition tonight by saying the council has previously formally had the offer to purchase the land and has previously considered purchasing the land and resolved not to do so. So that really closes off the petition and our response to that. As I said, that doesn't prevent the council from further considering this matter further at some point in time.
Any further comment? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried. Um, 14.1.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report is presented to Council tonight in regards to the community grants program that we run. This is the major community grants that we have open to community groups and organisations. So the report presented to Council tonight makes recommendations in relation to the 2017-2018 community grants for the major category. So we had 40 applicants this time around as part of this process, and the recommendation is that Council funds projects up to the value of $117,967. We received a huge range of projects that covered all areas of council from both a geographic and from a service provision and community engagement process. The quality of the grants was really strong, and we had huge involvement from community groups and organisations in the development of these projects and the grant process. So congratulations to everybody who put forward an application and developed and scoped their projects. The recommendation before council tonight is that the following organisations are successful. So the Country Women's Association Wangaratta District Branch, the Hamilton Park Cooperative Board of Management, the Glenrowan Indoor Carpet Bowls Incorporated, Eldorado Centennial Park Committee, North Wangaratta Football Netball Club, Wangaratta Hand Weavers and Spinners, James Tilson Kindergarten, the Burgoyne Creek Land Care Group, Millawa Recreation Reserve, Wangaratta District Specialist School, Wangaratta Little Athletic Centre, the Italian Pensioners Club, and the Burman Golf Club Incorporated.
Thank you. Any questions from the gallery? No questions from the gallery. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Fitzpatrick and Councillor Fuller. Do I have any discussion? Councillor Bustle.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll just speak about one of the people in Millawa Recreation Reserve. I think all the sporting footy clubs are very, very important, and I'm pleased to see that we're putting $15,000 towards the upgrading electricity, because every time they turn too many ply warmers on, they all go off. So it's going to cost them about $30,000. So this will help that sporting venue a lot to be able to get electricity there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried. (14.2) New sport and recreation.
Thank you. This report is in relation to our 10-year sport and recreation infrastructure plan. So we regularly, as a council, plan for the short, medium and long-term development of our recreation infrastructure across the municipality. To enable us to do this better and to have more thorough planning and implementation from both a costing and a design perspective, but also in the pursuit of funding opportunities and grants, we have developed a 10-year plan that looks at available funding opportunities and incorporates the needs of recreation organisations and clubs that exist within our municipality. So this has been developed in partnership with our clubs and groups. So we sent out an expression of interest process and invited clubs and organisations to submit their recreation infrastructure priorities and needs. And this has been incorporated into existing plans and strategies and developed in partnership with our Sport and Recreation Advisory Group. So the recommendation before council tonight is that council adopts the 10-year sport and recreation infrastructure plan, and that council begins progression of the immediate priorities of planning, grant attraction and infrastructure delivery.
Any questions from the gallery? No questions from the gallery. Someone like to move the recommendation?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'd like to amend the recommendation to include the following information. Adopts the 10-year sport and recreation infrastructure plan with an ongoing review process to monitor appropriateness of the timing, begins progression of the immediate priorities for planning, grant attraction and infrastructure delivery, and adds to the council thanks the Sport and Rec Advisory Committee for their review of this document, and that we continue to consult with them in conjunction with the funding announcements as appropriate.
Did you get that, Mr.? Have I got a second to the motion? Second to Councillor Benton. Is there any discussion? No discussion?
My discussion's a question today. This is just saying that the 10-year plan isn't fixed and nothing changes in 10 years. So this amendment is just saying the council will review it because things change from day to day. Thank you.
Any further? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried. Garth Mitchell Avenue Reserve Master Plan.
Thank you. This report is presented to Council for endorsement of the Mitchell Avenue Reserve Master Plan. So a couple of council meetings ago, we brought the draft plan to Council for recommendation for it to go out for further community consultation and review. So following that process, we took the draft plan out to the community. We engaged with schools and the local community and more broadly across the municipality and considered the feedback. So the recommendation before Council tonight is that following consideration of feedback received during the consultation period, the Council adopts a revised Mitchell Avenue Reserve Master Plan. That Council plans for the progressive implementation of the Mitchell Avenue Master Plan components, beginning with those funded within the 17-18 financial year, and Council notifies submitters of Council's decision.
Any questions from the gallery? No questions from the gallery. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Curry, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Any discussion?
I'd just like to say that as a former Yoronga person walking down this Mitchell Avenue and in this particular space of land, it's really good to see that it's finally going to be developed. I really look forward to seeing it. I actually look forward to actually spending some time down there when it is completed. So thanks to the council and thanks to all the people that put into this. I think it's great. I think the people of Yoronga will really appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried. We have a new face at the table tonight, Marilyn. The waste management strategy.
This report is presented to Council to consider the adoption of the waste management strategy 2018 to 2023 following the public exhibition period. Council recommendation is that Council, having considered submissions, adopts the waste management strategy 2018 to 2023 and also notifies submitters in writing of Council's decision.
Any questions from the gallery? No questions from the gallery. Someone like to move a recommendation? Councillor Rees, seconder. Councillor Fuller. Any discussion? No discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried. The petition, the adoption and repair of Peachel Bar walking track.
Thank you. This report is presented to Council to provide details of the outcome of an investigation into the request for speed reduction on the Eldorado Tarrawongi Road via petition tabled at the April Council meeting. The recommendation is that Council places this request on the agenda for the next Traffic Liaison Group meeting for consideration and recommendation to Vic Roads, being the responsible authority. Oh, sorry. We'll go back. This is a petition. This report is presented to Council to provide details of the outcome of an investigation of the request for repair of the Peachel Bar walking track by a petition tabled at the April Council meeting. The recommendation of this report is that Council considers the inclusion of the Peachel Bar walking track as a part of the rural placemaking project to be delivered in the 2018-19 financial year as at the 19th June Council meeting.
Questions from the gallery? No questions from the gallery? Someone like to move the recommendation?
Mr. Mayor, to put an alternative motion forward, an alternative recommendation, sorry. And that is just a tweaking of some words here. Instead of reading that the council will consider the inclusion of, to change that to the council will include the Peachel Bar walking track as part of the rural placemaking project to be delivered in the 2018-19 financial year at the 19th of June council meeting.
Will include.
Will include. So remove considers the inclusion.
Right. seconder of the recommendation? Councillor Fitzpatrick. Anyone wish to speak to the motion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? The motion's carried. Now we'll have the one. Now, Vic Rose.
Thank you. This report is presented to Council to provide details of the outcome of the investigation into the request for a speed reduction on Eldorado to Warrawongi Road by a petition tabled at the April Council meeting. The recommendation of this report is that Council places this request on the agenda of the next Traffic Liaison Group meeting, consideration and recommendations to Vic Roads being the responsible authority.
Questions from the gallery? No questions from the gallery. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Benton, Councillor Russell. Any discussion? No discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried. I have to apologise to members of the gallery. I've got a bung arm and it's a bit hard to turn the pages over. Development Services, Barry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First item tonight is 16.1, Wangaratta Planning Scheme Amendment C75. This report is presented to Council as the Planning Authority to consider a recently received panel report in relation to Amendment C75, which is Council's review of its planning scheme. This is something that's required for Council to undertake. And the real purpose is to review and enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of the planning scheme. It's not to make major changes, it's to look at where it can be more efficient, look at any updates in relation to ministerial guidelines, and any changes to the state planning policy or local planning policy framework in accordance with Section 12B of the Planning and Environment Act. The panel process has been through. There was one submission to the panel. In general, the panel was supportive of Council's strategic approach to the amendment and recommends that the amendment be adopted as exhibited, subject to some minor changes in the panel report. So the recommendation tonight is that Council, having considered the panel report, in accordance with Section 27 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, pursuant to Section 29(1) of the Act, adopt Amendment C75, subject to the changes outlined in the report. Pursuant to Section 31(1) of the Act, submit the adopted amendment to the Minister for Planning for approval, pursuant to Section 35, and notifies the submitters in writing of Council's decision.
Questions from the gallery? Any questions from the gallery? No questions from the gallery. Someone like to move the recommendation? Yes. Councillor Rees, Councillor Curry. Any discussion? Are you discussing this or? Councillor Rees.
Someone else on the...
No, you're right.
I'm okay. Mike, I actually have a question that's to Barry Green, the Development Services Officer there. Barry, can you just explain to everybody why we had to go to a panel when a panel is very cost prohibitive on Council? It costs us a lot of money to go to a Council when we only have one objector. Obviously, we couldn't resolve that issue. Even with one objector, do we need to go to panel?
Yes, thank you for the question. The Act is quite specific in relation to planning scheme amendments, and there were actually 7 submissions received in relation to the planning scheme review. And that looks across the whole of the municipality. It's not in relation to any parcel of land. 6 of the 7 were able to be resolved, or at least resolved to the satisfaction of the submitters. 1 could not be resolved, and as it could not be resolved, the Act says it must be referred to panel for consideration, even though there is only 1, and certainly it's a costly exercise.
Are you allowed to reveal who that submitter was, that we couldn't satisfy them, and obviously puts Council behind, more lengthy time delays, and obviously cost us money?
North East Water.
Any other? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? The motion's carried. 16 point. Right. 16. 16.2, draft domestic wastewater.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is in relation to a process that's been ongoing in council for approximately 18 months. There was a project done in 2012 across the state with some changed guidelines where the state enacted some pilot projects for the development of domestic wastewater management plans. Domestic wastewater management plans have been a responsibility of council since 2003 to have adopted and implemented. They're particularly relevant in proclaimed water catchments where we have a number of dwellings or activities that are not connected to reticulated sewage schemes. And council is required by the EPA Act and the Septic Tank Code of Practice to have a monitoring system where we monitor the permits that are issued by council that clearly have conditions that these systems are to be monitored, managed and maintained in accordance with their EPA accreditation. So this process has been ongoing with the water authorities. The two water authorities must sign them off. Consultants have been employed who have done these in a number of other municipalities. Council has previously considered a draft of this report. It's been out on exhibition rather than certainly public consultation. The recommendation tonight is that Council, having considered these submissions to the draft domestic wastewater management plan, of which there were 4, makes the changes to the draft domestic wastewater management plan as indicated in the attachments, adopts the DWMP with the changes outlined in the attachments, and advises all submitters and water authorities of Council's decision.
Questions from the gallery?
Peter Ryan from Greta West. I'd just like to ask the question.
Would you please come to the microphone and state your name, please?
Peter Ryan from Greta West. I'd just like to say, you Harry Buster was due about 4 weeks ago. He attended the Greta Hall and told us about this. Not many people knew about this. And what we'd like to know is how many rural people are going to be affected by this, because a lot of people don't know. And they saw this $150 inspection and that really, that was a bit more than a motor, you know what I mean? And is it going to be a one-off? And is every household going to be made to conform? Because I know for a fact, my father put ours in over 50 years ago. It's been pumped out once, and that held a family of 6. And it hasn't had a problem. And in my job, I deal with a lot of plumbers, and I can tell you now, some of these ancillary systems are full of maintenance, and they tell you that. If you've got a system that's working properly, with realm drains or slotted aggie, they do work well. But we're just wondering how far this is going to go. Is it a one-off thing, or are they going to go $150 a year, well in rural houses? Good little earner. Let's, you know, is it going to be 1 year, is it going to be 10 years or 15? That's the question I'd like to ask. And what we'd like to know too, is this already a foregone conclusion, or is it already cut and dry? Because I don't have much faith in Fox Dead and Spring Street, I can tell you. Really, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Ryan, for your
We'll answer, so I think we'll answer them as we go.
for the question in relation to the plan is really about council having a documented management program of inspecting. And a lot of council's records and a lot of the old records from some of the smaller councils, we don't have a lot of records of what's actually on people's properties, and we're required to have that sort of level of detail. So part of the first steps of this process is really to inspect all of the properties, because we couldn't find some of the old records, and a lot of the information has been done from aerial imagery of where properties are located. It's really a process now for council to go and inspect all of these properties, and it's acknowledged that a lot of the systems on particularly large properties, where they're not likely to leave the boundaries of the property, are still going to comply, and they're not going to need any sort of future works. But when the permits are issued initially for all of these systems to be installed, There's certain EPA accreditations for the systems that says how they're supposed to be maintained, and it's vastly different depending upon the system that's in there. So some of the systems, and you've noted that some of the newer treatment plants do require much more maintenance than the old-fashioned septics, and the septics are something that might be more appropriate on larger landfall where the soil conditions are appropriate. In some of the smaller blocks where they're closer to other residential properties, there are a lot of treatment plants, and some of those treatment plants, as part of their EPA accreditation, it comes back to which system people put in there, do require quarterly maintenance, so a quarterly inspection, and they may require things like their water testing to be done every 2 or 5 years. It depends on those accreditations, so it is different. In terms of the 150, the first step, at this stage we're hoping that a lot of those would be just, may only be annual costs, but for people to actually report on an inspection of their system, but it will depend on the system, because some of the older systems don't actually require an annual inspection, they only require a biannual or even a 3 to 5 year inspection. And they're all slightly different in terms of the way that they do it. So as much as possible, this is more about getting the information up to scratch, having a process involved where we can inspect, monitor and get records of all of these systems, because we've had instances where no one actually knew where some of these pipes were, and in some instances we've had a property where the next door neighbour wanted to put up a shed. He went and started digging the holes for the shed, and he ended up digging up his next door neighbour's septic field, which didn't go very well for either one of them. So as much as possible, it would be an annual, or could even be more than that in terms of biannual or 3 to 5 years.
I think part of the question too was that how many properties are involved, an estimate.
And that was part of trying to get the information. According to our officers, they believe there's somewhere in the vicinity of 4,500 of these in the municipality. In terms of the plan, they could identify about 3,900 to 4,000, so somewhere in the vicinity of 3,500 to 4,500 of these systems are in the municipality. And part of the monitoring process is really looking at where are the hotspots, where are the areas that we are having issues, and where do we get complaints in our environmental health team about smell and mosquito infestations, where we've got highly bogged areas, and I suppose the smelling environments. And where we have those areas, that having a plan like this where we've been out and monitored those systems, had a look, we can then advocate to North East Water about, well, perhaps in some of those areas they need to be looking at other forms of either trunk drains where multiple properties can connect into one, or a reticulated sewage scheme of some sort. So, and they're for more of the smaller premises where there are a lot more residential properties in close proximity.
Take your question now.
My name's Gary Marshall from Rita West. There was talk that you could just come onto our properties and look at it without our say-so, is that correct? Or do you need to get our permission to come up on the property to inspect it?
No, in terms of if we require access to the property, we can go onto the property.
Not that I say, mate, not come onto my property, but you talk to me. I don't think that's right. And is this going to be a one-off charge? Like, what if someone's property up to scratch and working, that person still get charged?
Well, that depends on the accreditation of what system they put in there as to what the requirements
Well, it's been
are.
signed off by council when the house was built, so. And it worked well, there's no smell, there's no nothing on my place, it's worked well, it's the secret of my cottage. There's no waterways, no nothing, it's on my own land. So why should I get charged for something that works that council signed off on when the house was built? It's a bit unfair, like a lot of people can't afford that extra $150 a year. It's bullshit.
Yeah, and in terms of people that live in the town areas where they are connected to reticulated sewage, obviously they pay a sewage rate and a sewage charge.
Yep.
These are, certainly when the permits are issued, and the permits that are issued have a condition on them that says that these systems are to be regularly maintained and monitored. And the final certificate to use also says the same thing, and this is about where is the documentary evidence that these systems are being maintained and monitored, particularly when they are within a reclaimed water catchment, which is a state provision.
But the place for 25 years, you've never come near it now. Then in that time to look at it, it works well. You know? So I just think it's pretty poor that you want to charge people for money when everything works.
Well, I think as was explained, it's something that the state government have brought in that we have to abide by.
I understand that, but it feels like a money grab, really. And a lot of people, there was no consultation about this, a lot of people know nothing about this, nothing. So it's pretty poor on council's behalf not to let everybody know this was going to happen.
Laura Kelly. Sorry, just a quick question to clarify.
Can you come to the microphones? We can't hear you if you...
No, sorry, that's okay. I just want to clarify when you mentioned that $150. So was that per inspection? It's based on 4,500 properties. That's $675,000 over 150, and you're saying they may be biannual, they may be 4 times a year. So you haven't clarified that?
I'm not sure of what clarification you
The
said.
clarification was, I didn't garner it from either of those questions, is the $150 per inspection? And you mentioned that some places may be required to be inspected 4 times a year. So it is per inspection, so if that's $675,000 for 4,500 property, so that could be times 4. Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Fred Gendry, with the inspection, when you do inspections, if there are systems that were never had permits for them originally in the Oxley Shire days or Wang Shire days, and you then present yourself and find a system that was never had a permit to be put in, what will happen there?
Thank you for the question. In terms of those systems, they will be evaluated as to whether they're working correctly by an experienced person in relation to septic fields, and if they are working correctly, that will be pretty much the end of the process.
So it won't have to be a permit application or anything like that done to get the system on permit?
No, it won't require any permit applications unless the system is not working correctly or in accordance with the EPA guidelines.
Thank you.
Dan?
Anne Alston in Tarawinji. I think in the last 2 years I've missed maybe 3 council meetings, and obviously that was the one that this was presented at. We have just literally got a certificate of occupancy for a property in Tarawinji. Our traditional septic tank was put in December this year. We chose that system. We had, because there were no ongoing costs and it's a reliable system, we foregoed a subdivision to be able to do that, to have the land size, to have that form of system. In no step along the way have we been informed that this was a possibility. And I really find that the information coming out is really disappointing in that process, because we really have been working with council really closely in regards to a build and septic tank systems. Not once was any of that mentioned.
Thank you. Done?
Thanks, Anne. In terms of traditional septics or a treatment plant, that's purely the owner's choice as to which system they put in. A plan like this is not about advocating one system over another. It's really just a monitoring program of what's actually in the ground.
Yeah, but in fairness to that, if we knew that we were going to be up for a monitoring cost every 12 months, we would have put in a traditional, one of the actual treatment plant systems, and then we could have subdivided our blocking parts. But we chose the traditional septic tank system because the requirement of land size was to not have the treatment plants.
I'd have to look at the individual application, because the difference between a traditional septic and a treatment plant doesn't necessarily mean the difference between being able to subdivide or not subdivide, because the land capability assessment still specifies a specified area of land that must be dedicated purely to effluent disposal on that land. The ability of a treatment plant is that because of the mechanical process, it's able to have that treatment area located in a different site on the site because it's not bound by gravity, whereas a traditional septic is bound by gravity.
But it's also, our understanding of it was that it's also based on land size too.
Through the Mayor, I think if I understand your point, and it was originally more about the fact that you weren't notified of this during the process. The point that I was going to make and that I would ask Barry to confirm is that when you sought and were issued a permit for whatever system you chose, which is not really the issue, there should have been a condition clearly noted on that permit that informed you of that obligation for it to be inspected annually. That would be a normal condition as I understand it, Barry.
Any other questions?
Graham Battens to me. I'd like to know where this is all going to lead. We as farmers, we're running cattle, there's manure all across the paddocks and it runs into the drains. We've got a couple of dead kangaroos and a table drain out the road here. It runs in too. And I know years ago we had a young family. We had one little boy that kept getting sick and my wife went and saw the doctor and said, I keep everything as clean as I can. And the doctor said, you better let him play in the gutters and in the dirt. He gets immune to it then. And I don't know whether a lot of people knew or not, but when the original tower was built here in Moyhu, the water system was pumped out of the river. And Frank Byrne down here had a cow missing. And it had gone over the bank into the river about 100 metres up from the pump and was that far deteriorated they couldn't do anything with it. So we used to just chuck a bag of lime on it every day and nobody got crook and nobody died. I just wonder what's going on, whether we're living in fantasy land.
Any other questions? No other questions? Someone like to move the recommendation?
Mr Mayor, I would like to move to defer this for 2 months. Clarifications on actions. Thanks, Mark. Clarifications on actions within the draft document. We need more of that. We need a full discussion with consultants, RMCG, and all residents need to know about this draft. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
You've had your say.
Really?
We've got a second to the motion.
Yes, I'll second it, Mr Mayor.
Second to the motion. Any discussion? Councillor Curry.
I'd just like to say that this is actually, while it sounds that some people in the community may not think this is an important piece of work, I think if people were to walk around the likes of Glen Rowan about 4 or 5 years ago, they would understand why this piece of work is extremely important. Not all systems are running as they should be. The EPA, you know, there are a strong set of rules, and not everybody's following them. It's good for the people that aren't, but at the end of the day, not everybody is. And you know, things are in the water. There's some random comments were made. You know, we'll probably go back to the Black Plague days and really look at the causes of what they were from. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councillor Benton.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Reading the document, I am seconding the motion into deferring. I believe there's a lot of anomalies. I don't believe the document at the moment explains exactly as to what it's intended. It does cover stormwater. We do have a state environmental planning policy draft out at the moment for review, and I do believe it does implicate the very thing that's been put forward tonight.
I understand that we need to catalogue and have a database and get some of these systems onto a database, but I do believe we have got to give officers clear direction. I don't believe the document does that. I think it's very inconsistent in some parts, and I think some of the water authorities really should be asked a few more questions in why they haven't proceeded as they did sit on a steering committee in 2007 with this. And it doesn't say any documentation, it's not noted of whatever happened to that steering committee and what their relevance in where we're heading with this. And I can understand, and I have a little fair bit of empathy with some of the comments that have been made tonight. I probably represent the far parts of the Shire that don't have any sewage reticulated to the area. And in that area, it has a confusing in document stating that some of the towns have a lesser need than others, and in the next paragraph it reverses those wordings. So therefore, I think before I'm prepared to adopt it or the plan as is, I want some more clarification.
Thank you. The reason I wouldn't accept another question from you was that I've accepted a motion from the council.
Well, I think the council needs to be a lot more upfront with this and give circulars out to all the residents. It's a big cover up. Everyone needs to know, and not many people know. You guys are paid by us to do a job, so get it happening, and everyone needs to know what's going on here, because it's a big cover up.
When you print that next newsletter, it's too shiny to use as toilet paper, I know that.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Oh, Councillor Reid.
I'd just like to talk further about it as well, and I understand the residents' concerns over it, and there probably has been perhaps, I'm not saying there is, a shortcoming by council not to notify people, not that we have to go out to a public consultation on this issue. It's not designed. You do blame council for a lot of these situations. It's not always our fault. We are the people who have to implement something the North East Water tell us to do. Murray-Goulburn Water and the EPA are telling us this plan, similar to this, and I agree with Councillor Benton's thing that a few more questions need to be answered, but we seem to cop the rough end of the stick from what other organisations and statutory authorities, which means we can't as councillors say, no, we're not going to listen to you, we'll do what we want. We are not allowed. So just bear that in mind. Thank you.
If you hadn't told us what was going on, you wouldn't cop any stick, mate.
Murray-Goulburn, a milk producer.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? You want to close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I empathise with the people with the anxiety here, and clearly there has not been enough consultation. There's no doubt about that. And I understand that it just looks like a poo tax. I understand that. And so I urge all my fellow councillors to support this motion. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour, and the motion is that we defer it for 2 months. The motion's carried. Committee reports, advisory committee and assemblies of judges.
Through the Mayor, I'm actually proposing to recommend that we move 18.1 and 19.1 together. 18.1 deals with some minutes of advisory committee meetings held in Jan, Feb and March, and 19.1 deals with some assemblies of council records from meetings held in April and May. They are simple administrative processes.
Any questions from the gallery? Someone like to move the recommendation? Move Councillor Curry, second Councillor Fuller. Any discussion? Put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried. We're now down to, there's no notice of motion, there's no urgent business, public question time.
speak to Councillor Bussell last week. I was pretty frustrated about the state of our roads and lanes. Myself, our lane's been re-sheeted recently, and I'm up to 14 tyres of these. 6 or 7 are fractures, and the others are new tyres. And I'm not putting cheap tyres on the car, just so you know, but I'm a little bit sick of the state of our lane. The rocks are so big and hard and compacted in. It's one of our neighbours is quite ill. The carers aren't willing. You know, they come down the lane, they're going 5 k's an hour to get 3 k's down the road because they're concerned they're going to get flat tyres. It's happening time and time again. And last week the RACV then received 2 flat tyres coming down our lane. So I'd just like to find out what is happening. I must admit the roads team are very good at coming out, but it actually hasn't rectified the issue. So I'm here today to try and get some
So
rectification.
what road are we talking?
Hodges Lane. Yeah. And I'm just pretty frustrated at this point in time.
Unfortunately, the manager of infrastructure is sick and not here tonight, and I'm sure that Marilyn wouldn't be able to answer too much of it.
No. No, that's okay. That seems to be what keeps on happening, not at this stage. Thank you.
Okay. Off the back.
You've deferred, that's been for 2 months, to the wastewater management. Are you going to let us know what's going on before it goes?
Hang on, just a moment. I think there was a question or a comment about the previous question before we, through the mayor, before we launch into yours.
Referring to Hodges Lane, Mr Mayor, I have already put in a CRMS to that lane and stated the issue there, so I look forward to that being followed up.
Right, thank you. Now, would you come to the microphone? You want to speak to that one too?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
So just in short, what I guess the councillors are trying to do to these roads is we put more money away in the budget, or propose again this year. So with a plan to continually increase the road budget. It's increased, I can't remember the amount over the last couple of years, but it has been.
Is that going to pay for my tyres though? Like today, the guy said, don't worry about paying for your repairs. It's beyond a joke. 14, it probably is 16, but 14 tyres, let alone the 2 next door, let alone the other 2. Do you know what I mean? Like we're talking a huge issue. What happens if it blows out and someone hits a tree or something happens?
That could be seen on any road, but it's probably not worth me getting into debate over something like this.
But who's going to wear my cost? That's what I'm asking. We do pay our rates. We pay our rates on time. We want some service on our lane.
Through the mayor, we do 2 things. One is we obviously need to look at the specific issue of your road and what's going on, and we'll do that in response to the request that Councillor Bussell referred to. I'm also happy to talk to you after the meeting tonight specifically about your question.
Yeah.
You've deferred that to the wastewater management 2 months. Will we be told what's going on before that goes any further, or what's happening?
How do you mean be told what's going on?
Whether it's going to go through, whether we're going to get charged, or what it's going to cost us if it all goes through?
Well, the intention is we get the consultants back.
Right.
And it may be that the consultants are not, or we get another application a motion to come to the council. It gets deferred again if we're not satisfied.
But if it goes through and we don't know, and it's going to be charged, we're going to be told, or is it just going to...
Well, how are we going to tell you?
Well, a bit better than last time to find out about in the reader budget. Why can't you put something decent in the newspaper so everyone knows about it? No one knew about this, and that's what everyone's teased off about. No one knew about it. A lot more people still don't know about it.
But through the mayor, my understanding of what was being asked for from the motion that was passed was that we do 2 things. One was that we get the author of the report back to spend some time with council working through some points of clarification and questions. And the second, that we offer some information sessions for people in the rural communities who are affected by it. which I think sensibly we would promote through the various community newsletters that are produced within most of those rural townships, so that people know when those information sessions are on and whether
And we'll have time to respond if we can. So it'll come out with plenty of time for us to.
We've got a 2-month time frame, so we ought to be able to achieve that. I guess the thing that's important to note, and I think a couple of the councillors touched on this already, it is actually a requirement that we do this. So it's not like we can ask people's opinion about whether they think it's a good idea, but what we do need to make sure is that people actually understand what's being proposed, and those are obviously two slightly different things. And as I think a couple of the councillors said, we don't have a lot of choice in this, but we certainly need to make sure that people are informed about what's proposed.
Yeah, it just, everyone, the way it's gone about, everyone just thinks the money grab. No one knew about it. No one knew about it. And that's the general consensus from people I've talked to, it's just a money grab. And you just think it's BS without consultation.
Well, as I think Councillor Rees tried to explain,
Yeah, I understand it. Thank you very much.
we're governed by what the EPA and those tell us that are.
If we don't tell you how we feel, you're not going to know,
Mr Mayor, we'll also try and get Goulburn Murray water, not Murray Goulburn water, Goulburn Murray water in also to talk to us, and also North East Water to see maybe how they can change the requirements, or how the requirements can be financially better off or not too. So these are the options that we need to look at during this 2-month period as well, so we can report back to everybody to explain it further.
Other questions from the gallery?
Robert Morton from Millawong, Mr Mayor. The Planning Scheme Amendment C68 relating to the Millawong Township Development Plan was split into 2 parts, with Part 1 being adopted and Part 2 covered by Part 7 of the relevant motion passed on the 20th of June 2017. Part 7 of that motion read, Re-exhibit C68 Part 2 as follows. A. Rezone land identified as Zone Map 3738, which is consistent with the privately owned land contained in Precinct D of the Millawong Township Development Plan from the previously exhibited Rural Living Zone 1 to Low Density Residential Zone, and any other planning tools as appropriate to enable its orderly development. My question is, why has Council failed to take any action on that motion, as has been made clear to me in an email from Council Senior Planner to me on the 3rd of May 2018, which advised, thank you for your email. To answer your question at this stage, no further work has been undertaken on Part 2 of Amendment C68. That's 11 months after the motion was passed. Could I have an answer to that question, please, Mr Mayor?
Through the chair and for everybody else's benefit, I did have the opportunity this morning to spend some time with you, Rob, talking through some of these issues. So some of what I'll say now you've already heard this morning. I guess to go back to the motion from 2017 last year, which talked about re-exhibiting that portion of what had previously been re-exhibited. As I explained, when we make any sort of change to the planning scheme through an amendment process, we need to do a body of work which provides some explanation and justification about why we want to change the scheme from one thing to another. And ultimately then that's all submitted through the Minister after quite a lengthy process for the Minister to determine whether or not he or she agrees with that proposed change. The challenge we have in this case is the strategic work for the original exhibition did not support the rezoning to low density residential of the area we're talking about. It supported the rezoning to another zone, to a rural living zone, which is what we proposed happen. In order then to re-exhibit it, which is what the motion was, there needs to be a further body of work done on that piece of land specifically to try and provide the strategic justification to ultimately give to the Minister to convince him or her about why it should be low density residential and not rural living as it was originally proposed. We've not had a person resource or a budget allocation to do that body of work. We've spoken to the council, and we're proposing in the next budget that work is done as part of a broader strategy looking at lifestyle blocks across the Shire, and we believe doing that as part of a broader strategy actually gives it a better chance of success. So that's essentially the sequence of things that's happened. We have had discussions with the department, state government department, about that as a proposed way forward. We have prepared a business case to get that into the budget. So it's not like it has nothing been done, but have we produced the new justification to exhibit that? No, the answer is we haven't.
I'm sorry, that was a quote from your council senior planner that said nothing had been done. It was also use any other planning tools as appropriate to enable its orderly development. Nothing's been done.
I won't go through it all again. I've explained what we have done, but I acknowledge, have we actually prepared this thing to be re-exhibited? No, we haven't.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, my second question relates to C68 as compared to the adopted C or recommendation of Amendment C75 tonight. In paragraph 4.8 of Wangaratta Planning Scheme C75 relating to Glenrowan land rezoning, the panel recommends before adopting the amendment, Council should notify the subject property owner and any other affected property owners to provide them with the opportunity to comment on the proposed rezonings. This was done with a small block of land on the outskirts of Millawa in C68 Part 1. Why can't C68 Part 2 be treated the same way?
Defer to our learned Director of Development Services to deal with that one. I'm not quite as across the specifics as that one.
Thanks, Robert, for the question. In terms of the scale, the site that you're referring to covers a number of properties. I think there's 8 or 9 properties involved in the area of land that you're specifically referring to, and the implications of further reductions of the zonings and further additional land. That was a substantial change to what is there now, whereas the one that you're referring to about the single block within the C68 Part 1 was a single parcel of land, a small block that had a house on it that was in a farming zone. So it did not change in any way the further development opportunities of that land. It was purely to reflect what was the existing use of that land, and it was the consequential provisions were, that it related to one block only.
The land that's subject to C68 Part 2, although there are more than 8 owners, or there are 8 owners, it is all the same lifestyle. Not rural living as you've suggested, but more in relation to low density residential, as in every other block of land between the township to the north and the township to the south. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure I want to get into a planning debate, but the report that was done by an expert planning company and council's town planners have determined that the land in question, for your land, best described as rural living environment, not low density, and to convert it to low density increases its development potential rather than what was proposed, which was reflecting the current land use.
I understand what you're saying. It's an extra 6 blocks in the whole township of Millawa. Thank you, Mr. Green.
I'd just like to comment further on that. Us as councillors, when deciding this original C68 amendment, to make the process go further and to continue its process with the C68 amendment, we as councillors decided to break it into 2 parts. Part 1, to continue the original planning process that had gone on, which we approved, as long as Part 2 was to be looked at early in the coming year. To be looked at not in a conglomerate group of other properties around, but on its own. That's my thoughts on what happened at our El Dorado meeting and why we improved what was already there. Otherwise, We approved it in a two-part series, otherwise it was going to hold up the whole amendment process of C68 for all the other neighbours and residents of Millawa, and we didn't want to do that. We decided then to change it to a two-part motion, and it was it was agreed that it would be looked at early in the new year.
Through the Mayor, in response to your query, Councillor Rees, I guess I would say two things. Our understanding from the officer's perspective is that we have put a proposition forward to advance this, and it is budgeted for in the 18-19 year. That proposition was put to Council, I think, in March, so in early 2018. It is certainly open to the Council if they choose to deal with that parcel of land separately rather than doing it as part of a broader strategy. You can do so. You would just need to resource that work through the upcoming budget. So that is certainly open to you to pursue.
Okay, so I'll refer back to our councillors, and obviously this will happen in a briefing session early next week to have a look to see what we can do in relation to that. I hate being to promise something, and I believe that promise was brought through Director Green, who's the one that said that he would look at it when a question was asked by Rob Morton at that meeting, and he said it will be looked at early in the new year, not in a group of other land zonings around the township of Wangaratta and Millawa and all the other areas to be rezoned. It was purely on the Millawa Township second part 2 of C68. So, as a councillor, we promised to do that. I think we have to proceed with our promise.
Question, and that is when, so within this budget, when are you expecting this to be completed, or this part 2 as a month? So when would you expect the completion date to be?
Through the Mayor, I don't actually have a good answer to that question at this point in time. We've got 2 officers in that strategic planning team, one of whom is about to go on maternity leave, which left us with 1 person to carry a fairly big strategic load. So we need to give some thought to what are the projects we need to complete in the 12 months and how we actually resource those. So I don't actually have an answer to that tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, but again, I say it's only been 11 months, hasn't it? So
Yes, and I sympathise with you that it should have been addressed a lot earlier.
thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah.
Gary Nevin, Bonneville. My question relates to what has now been referred to as a residential lifestyle stroke land use study. And it's patently obvious that the statutory notice that you give in relation to any of the consultation, it might meet the legal requirements, but it's totally inadequate. Every time something controversial comes up, we have a room full of people who've never heard of it before. It's been advertised, it's been open for submissions, and it's clear that the consultation process is just not adequate. Now, this residential lifestyle land use study, when the study was done to start off C75, your consultants consulted with everyone but the user group. They came up with a report that was 2 inches thick that the administrator adopted, and it's been exhibited and gone through the process. But the consultants did not consult with the user group. They didn't consult with the consultants who use the planning scheme. They consulted in-house and then consulted with the authorities. Can you as councillors try and ensure that whoever starts off this residential lifestyle land use study does do that before producing a document? Because what happens is they produce a document without the public consultation that then they want to defend when the public consultation takes place. Whereas if there's been a public consultation as part of their brief beforehand, the document is likely to be a lot better and a lot more acceptable than will be the case if that consultation doesn't take place. And what seems to be contemplated there, I would tell you, I think would be a 2 year plus process, because you're going to have consultants do something. Now, I think you've got enough material there from the previous consultation processes on amendments that have failed or been discredited to know where that should be going. But there'll be a report put, you'll then get it, you'll consider it, you'll put it on exhibition and go through the process.
So what's your question?
Will you, as part of the group of consultants, as councillors, insist that the consultants consult with the public before producing a document?
Thank you. Pardon? Anyhow, that's the question. Thank you.
Whilst I think the question was really directed at the council, the council has recently endorsed an engagement strategy, and I'm sure it will be the council's intent to conduct their future consultations in line with that strategy, Gary.
Other questions from the gallery?
My name's Kevin Felmingham. I'm currently the president of the Wangaratta Kennel Obedience Dog Club. We'd just like to say to Wangaratta City, great job for the off-lead dog park. We think it's a great idea for Wangaratta, and we'd just like to know, how soon is this going to happen? Obviously, just recently we had two major dog attacks in Wangaratta, and we just want to know how soon that sort of this program's going to happen. Because obviously, as a kennel club, we're pretty concerned about not having a fenced-in area. We have something like 100 and something members at our kennel club, and Urunga is just an absolutely fantastic area to have it. We'd just like to know how soon it's going to happen.
John?
Thank you. We agree. We had huge feedback about the dog park, both from the Urunga neighbourhood but also more broadly. So there's actually money in this year's budget to start planning, and then hopefully in the next 12 months it'll be fully implemented. So it's one of the first priorities, along with the planning of the children's garden, for implementation. So.
The thing that I'm concerned about is the equipment that you might be going to put in there. Just be mindful of what we do put in there. We've had incidents at Wodonga, where the equipment that was put in there was a little bit too big for the small dogs, and they had dogs fall off and injure themselves. And the other thing is making sure that people that are using the park not trying to force their dogs to go over that equipment, because who's going to be liable if a dog should injure itself on council equipment? Because we have the same issue with our showgrounds, where we have people coming in on the grounds. So we're just mindful of where the legalities stand if somebody injures the dog or somebody's dog gets injured.
Yeah. Thank you, and we'd love to talk further and get your insight into that, but I know a range of different sizes of equipment has been planned.
Yep. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well
Thank
done.
you. Any other questions? Jenny?
Jenny Hart from Wangaratta. My question is actually just a question for clarification and so that it goes on the public record. The $1.5 million funding for the hydrotherapy pool that the council received from the state government for the Community Infrastructure Fund Better Pools program, when that application was it made in a staged approach, and so that the application was solely for a stage of development for the hydrotherapy pool?
Through the chair, thanks Jenny. The application was specifically for the hydro pool. It was also clear that it was part of the broader aquatic strategy, which included other things like the 50-metre outdoor pool. We've obviously been working with the state government, who is responsible for that grant over the time that's elapsed, to say that our preference is to wait to get the outcome of our application for the 50 metre pool funding so that we can do all of that as one project, which is much more cost effective for the council to deliver in its entirety rather than doing it as two stages. There will come a point, I suspect, where we will have to make a decision just to get on with the hydro pool if we're not able to secure the other funding.
Right. So the actual application to the state government was made with no predication on the 50 metre outdoor pool funding or being built. It was solely for hydrotherapy. The hydrotherapy
I'm not sure
building.
I absolutely understand your question, but the money was specifically granted for the hydrotherapy pool. If we don't get funding for the 50 metre pool, we will build the hydrotherapy pool using our money and the state government's money. Does that actually answer your question?
Close enough, yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
The second one is not so much a question, but a comment with regard to the Mitchell Avenue Reserve. And I think the council is sitting on a phenomenal opportunity with the Children's Garden, which is a suggestion close to my heart for part of that location. And I have my daughter with me here tonight, and they actually just went on a school excursion in the last few weeks down to the Children's Garden at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Melbourne, and they offer all sorts of programs. Just think of the opportunity this council could seize if it developed a garden on par with what we have down at the Royal Botanic Gardens, the people we could bring into the region from other schools in the area instead of having them to travel down to Melbourne. And I just think you need to make sure, you know, your focus is above the bar and looking very, very high. And the opportunity that you have here, don't let that opportunity slide.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, councillors. My name is Chris Wallace. My question is just about the town plan for Moyhu. I've talked to the strategic planners about this, just to give you a bit of a history. I've got land that does border Bartley Street, and I get people dropping in weekly, you know, wanting, there's no land for anywhere to build out here. So I'm just wondering that the planners have told us that it will be done, the plan will be done this financial year. I have registered some interest with them in regards to that, but we've just heard no feedback, I don't know whether anything's going or not, so I just wonder if anyone's got any information on where we're going with that, whether it will actually be done this financial year or not.
Thanks, Chris, for the question. The work in relation to Moyhu Township Development Plan has commenced, and it was commenced as part of the community planning program that was done. So Megan Kelly from our strategic planning unit has been engaged with Jamie's team in terms of developing the underlying sort of documentation to prepare the Moyhu Township Development Plan, and we're proposing to prepare that in-house following a similar methodology that was used for the Glenrowan, Oxley and Lillooet Township Development Plan. So yes, work has commenced, and I'm happy to get Megan to provide you with an update of where she's up to with that project.
Yeah, that'll be good, because she did promise she'd give us up to date with where it's at, because, you know, I've got a fair bit of information and local knowledge that would certainly help with that. So I really would appreciate if we could get some consultation on that process. Thanks all.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Mr. Mayor, I understand that if I get a parking ticket and I put in an objection to the parking ticket for whatever reason, but the panel that hears that objection is more than likely made up of the people who bought the parking meters in the first place, which I consider inappropriate, and the people who are administering the council laws, and that the council laws for those parking meters. I'm asking you, Brendan, really, would you move that the mayor become part of that panel when letters be reviewed, or his nominee? He may nominate another councillor, he may nominate a member of the public, but I think it should be more open than it is now. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. We do have what's called an infringements panel, you are correct. That panel is generally not comprised of the people who actually issue the tickets. They may well support the process in terms of providing some documentation to the panel. The membership of the panel actually changes each time they meet and has a cross-section of people from across the organisation are involved on a rotating basis to make sure each panel is different and different people's views are sought on when people do challenge a parking fine or any other type of infringement, and that gives it some independence from the team that actually issue the notices and the infringements. I've obviously not had any time to talk to the Mayor about your proposition, but my off-the-cuff response, without the benefit of that conversation, is no, I wouldn't recommend that the Mayor or any other councillor sit on that panel. I think it is an administrative process, it's an operational matter, it's not strategic in nature, and the people who are employed to conduct the administration and the operations of the council, i.e. the staff, should be the ones who determine those, and they actually have delegation to determine those.
Thank you for your answer, Brendan. However, yes, it could be argued that it's purely an administrative procedure. However, if we're going to make it administrative, let's open the door so somebody can come and observe the meeting. But thank you for if you would talk to the Mayor about it, I very much appreciate it. My second question, Mr. Mayor, is that as another administrative matter, is that if I went into Ford Street tonight in front of the council building and said, "Where's the meeting?" and I'd made a mistake, how would I know it is at Moyhu? And if I went to any other venue where the council meetings are held, and once again, I've made the mistake, how would I know where the meeting actually is? So what I'm asking you, Brendan, would you organise a next meeting board outside every venue where council meetings are held with the next meeting written on it, where the next meeting will be? Now, once we've decided that, my next part of the question, it's the same question, Mr. Mayor, I'm not in the three. The next part of my question is that if you were putting a show on here and you were asking $25 a head to come in, out the front, it'd be like a hula thing. There would be lights and flashing lights and signboards. Tonight, if I'd have known how dark it was, I'd have brought me torch. I'm saying to you, when the meeting is outside the city, please bring a floodlight and floodlight the area for car parking and for the front of the hall. I thank you.
Through the Mayor, can I deal with your suggestion to introduce a $25 cover charge to council meetings first? I actually think that's one of your best ever suggestions, and we'll implement that immediately. Notice boards for the meetings, I can certainly see value in having some sort of permanent fixture at the council office advising of times, venues, etc. of future meetings. And we'll certainly have a look at what's practical there, Brian. I think that could add some value. I'm not sure whether having a similar board at every single community hall all around the Shire where we may only hold a council meeting at any of these venues once every 3 years or something, so I'm not sure people would come to the Moyhu Hall to find out where the next council meeting might be, but certainly I think having some sort of central notice, electronic screen or something at our main office saying, here's the meeting schedule and here's the venues and so forth, makes pretty good sense to me, and we'll get the team to have a look at that. Is there another part to your second question they had about 4 parts to it, floodlighting.
Yeah, I'd like the floodlight. If you haven't got one, I'll bring mine.
Yeah. We all arrived here in daylight and didn't give it a thought, obviously, but as we get into the more wintry months, it does become an issue. We do try not to schedule the rural meetings during those colder, darker months for that very reason, but I think it's a good point to be mindful of, whether there is appropriate public lighting and stuff at venues when they are at night. So I'm not quite sure how we'll address that, but it's something we'll take on board to have a look at.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? David?
Mr Mayor, I noticed in the newspapers in the last few days a very, I think, positive story with regard to the Qantas Flying School, which I understand involves the cooperation, hopefully, between a number of different councils, Federation, Wangaratta Rural City, Yarrawonga, and maybe one other. I think Albury are also interested in coming in. It seems to me that not only is that a wonderful opportunity if it can be brought to fruition, and I understand that you've been part of the discussions, it also seems to me that if the facilities that are being provided for a flying training school are upgraded and made better, the aerodrome itself made better, that's also going to create additional opportunities, particularly for the quick transit of perishable products between this district, which I think we have an opportunity for tremendous amount of additional endeavour in that area. I can think of cherries for one thing, and it would mean perhaps that it would be possible to have direct flights from, say, in the Wangaratta Aerodrome or Yarrawonga or Cobram area for that matter, direct into markets in Southeast Asia. I wonder if you could indicate whether you've got that in your mind, and if so, make some comments as to what endeavours that you as the council will have towards developing those particular processes, not only the Qantas flying training school, which has enormous advantages, but also the more distance, perhaps, possibility of an expediting export of produce in this area to Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Mr Evans. The only thing I can say is that the 4 councillors who did meet last week have all got different size airports, and that was one of the things that we really thought about, was the ability to get fresh food to Asia very quickly. Tocumwal, which is in Berriganshire,
Federation.
They have a World War II airfield, which has got a strip 3.1 kilometres long, which will take 747s, and it's not controlled airspace. But of course, Tocumwal's a fairly small town, and there'd have to be a lot of infrastructure put into it. But we've just had the one meeting, and each of the councils have put their own applications in, and certainly Wangaratta has, and we've now received something back from Qantas to provide more information.
Well, I'd indicate, as I understand it, the Wangaratta area strip is about 1.8 kilometres long, and that's certainly adequate for the early stages of pilot training. I don't think you have to have an airport that will take a 747. You can have an airport that will take smaller aircraft, and certainly for not only for Qantas training is a smaller airport a very integral part, and can be, of any flying training system, but it's also very adequate for the sort of thing that I've just suggested now, which is transport of perishable products. And you're not going to get 747 loads, not at the present time, but you get smaller aircraft. And I hope that you are aware of that and take that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the gallery?
I've got some more, but you won't let me.
Good evening, George Snowling, Moyhu. You're talking about how dark it is around here. I know it's not council's problem, but if you go home tonight, go home this way to Glenrowan. What's the chances of getting Vic Rose to put a single white line down the middle of the road, so that when you go home from here to Glenrowan, you won't go off the road left or right. It's not so bad now. You get a cold wintry night and it's raining, and you go from here to Moyhu, it's not so bad. You've got a nice road. But if you go this way to Glenrowan and it's raining, 5 miles an hour is a good speed.
George, you should come to more council meetings, because at the last council meeting, we had a request for the Greta Kilpera Road to have white lines on the edges for the same reason.
Yeah, I can understand, but that'd be a good one, but just one line down the middle.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. In response to your question, Council did look at this issue yesterday, and got Vic Roads and Oss Roads recommendations for line marking in the centre of the road. And these roads, according to their estimation, are not wide enough to put a line down the centre, because it will then cause people to be on the side of the road, part dirt and part road surface. So as far as the statutes go, they're not wide enough to line mark down the centre. We did check that out yesterday.
Thank you.
Okay?
Any other questions? There's no other questions. We do have a couple of confidential items. We'll have to go out in the cold and leave you in the warm for a cup of tea, but we shouldn't be very long. But we need to go in the other room. Will someone move?
Before you go, Mayor I'm chairman of the local hall committee here, and I'd just like to thank the councillors for coming along to our hall tonight. I'd also like to thank everybody else for coming along, and to the gentleman here, we have in line some upgrades to the hall. We might get you a spotlight, you never know. Thanks very much. Enjoy your cup of tea afterwards.
Happy to be with you. Those in favour? Yes. As you go over Resume the meeting. Move Councillor Curry, seconding Councillor Bustle. Any further business? I'll declare the meeting closed and thank you all for your attendance.